World.
Going on in the world. This is stunning stuff. I mean, kind of, once every 20 or 30 years sort of stuff. It's really shocking to me.
Well, it's for me. It's like okay, we expected uh, trends to move in this direction. Trends being de-dollarization, people fleeing to harder assets, and a a correction in the monetary balance of the world. Did you expect it to play out like this? How it
No, I
has in
sure didn't.
the last month, particularly.
I sure didn't. And it just goes to show you can never figure out what the trigger is or what the snowflake is that'll trigger the avalanche. But the two, the drinking word for this podcast ought to be counterparty risk, right? And it started with Trudeau, right? He says, you send a donation to some guys who are protesting and I can grab your money. And then it got escalated to the sovereign level, and obviously, what Putin did was an illegal act, and the U.S. says, you invade a country without authority, commit a war crime, and we can grab all your foreign reserve assets. And, so I mean, whose money is this anyway? I mean, if these governments are basically saying, your money is ours. And, it's just shocking. I mean, it's like a walk, as I said, just before we got started here, it's like a walking advertisement for non-state money, Bitcoin and gold. It's stunning, absolutely stunning.
It is, and it's again, it's sort of like an emperor wears those clothes situation, particularly for the U.S., because especially with the sanctions against Russia, I completely agree. Like what's going on in Ukraine is obviously an illegal act, but the U.S. gets put in this weird situation where they look like a bunch of hypocrites. Well, it's like, hey, just like 20 years ago, you
Oh,
went into Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses, and similar
absolutely,
things did not happen to
absolutely.
you.
As you and I have discussed before, I mean, there's plenty of government misbehavior to go around on all sides. I mean, using the Nuremberg war crime standards, George Bush is a war criminal for starting the Iraq War. There's no doubt about that. So, and here these guys are kind of doing the same thing. I mean, these governments are just, playing by their own hard and fast rules, that they can do whatever they want to do. And what it tells everybody else in the world. I mean, everybody's watching this, right? And your foreign reserves. If you're a country, your foreign reserves or your accumulated surplus of things you've done and worked hard for and sold in and above what you purchased, and that's like your savings account. And to know that you have them in the Western financial system, and the Western financial system says to you, "Hey, we don't like what you're doing politically. We can grab your stuff." It's like, wow, that's an earthquake. And I mean, even China, which is obviously kind of aligned with Russia in this whole thing, they got to be thinking hard about that as well, right? I mean, they've got a lot of foreign reserves. So opens just an enormous Pandora's box. And I think I mean, like I said, it's an advertisement for stateless money. I mean, if this doesn't create huge demand for gold and Bitcoin, nothing ever will.
Yeah, well, I think the it's a very interesting situation because it is obvious that Russia and China, to a certain extent, have maybe been preparing for a bifurcation from the dollar system over the last couple of decades. Have been accumulating a lot of gold. Russia's been dumping treasuries, and again, you've been tweeting a lot the last few days about the commodities markets, and that's why I'm very excited to speak with you, particularly because I think what we're finding right now is that's where a lot of the signal of what's actually happening
Right,
is located right now. Is in commodities markets, whether it be energy prices, grain prices, metal prices.
right,
The stock markets have fallen, but I don't think they're
right.
quite.
Right. And it's a great question, and it's the right area to be looking at. The tricky part is that there are two things going on in there. There's one, the debasement of the currency, so the prices are going up as a result of that. The other is, of course, the supply disruptions. And if you're not going to get supply, of course, that can lead to panic buying. That's some of what we've seen. But related to that, and a point I think is important to make is that people say, and I credit Luke Groman for helping me a lot in the thinking through of this, although I could understand some of it without his help. People say, what did Putin do here? What was the whole point? Was this really about missiles on his border? Was it about, all his other grievances with the West? I mean, who knows? But to me, the signal that comes through in Putin's move is that Putin is very much here behaving the way Charles de Gaulle did in the 60s. I mean, So he's got a country that has a lot of natural resources, and they sell those natural resources for paper dollars that we can print. And I think he just called our bluff on these paper dollars. And he just said, you know what? We're tired of that. We're not going to play that game anymore. We don't like how you treat us politically. You haven't treated us well. You haven't listened to us. You don't allow us to be a partner at the table when we try to be a partner at the table. And there are times when they have tried. And we understand that what keeps your system going is this paper gold fiat system. And as a result of that, we call, we're calling you, and you need to now start to pay us with real money, not fake money. These guys, Putin and these guys, he sent representatives to the GATA conferences in the past that learned about the gold suppression scheme. And if you look at the gold suppression scheme, the petrodollar, and really the dollar standard that we're on as the world's reserve currency, that's what's allowed us to have all our power, and he knows it. And I think he reached the point at which he saw us as being vulnerable, and he got fed up, and he said, "Okay, I call. I'm gonna go start a war, and everything you need, I've got. I don't really need much from you." I mean, he exports, hundreds of trillions, at least $200-300 trillion worth of real stuff, and he only imports, between 40 and 80 trillion or billion. I'm sorry, $1 billion worth of machine tools and equipment, other things that we make. And he can get that, probably can get around the sanctions. And so, to me, what he just did is he shot the dollar in the head, and he really did. He just came out and he just shot the dollar in the head. And it's almost, in my mind, it's almost a certainty now that the dollar reserve currency is going to collapse, and we're going to have hyperinflation. I mean, I always kind of thought this was coming because of the way the math worked, but now I can see the path of how we get from where we are today to having that happen. Because what are we going to do? I mean, we've got enormous inflation everywhere. What's Powell going to do? Come out and try and increase interest rates? I mean, to stop the inflation? I mean, one, it won't work. Two, the inflation is going to continue. And three, Gresham's law is going to kick in here in a very big way. And as it does, more and more people are going to realize the only way to protect your wealth is to have stateless money, because the state can't make the money good. I mean, it's amazing how far out over their skis the state is on all this paper money we printed. And you and I talked about this in our last meeting. I mean, and we can get into it in the future, but in this conversation. But the amount of paper gold that's out there is just stunning, and the correct gold price is multiples of today's price, just multiples of it.
Your wife won't believe it until it hits $3,000, though.
No, but my wife doesn't believe that. Yeah, well, she's been long suffering, and to be honest with you, I've been long suffering, and all us gold bulls have been long suffering, and all the Bitcoin guys had a lot of laughing at our expense in the last couple of years, because you guys got a 5-bagger and we've been sitting flat. And these two assets are going to seesaw back and forth. And I've often said, and I always said, they're both great assets, and in some ways Bitcoin's better, and in many ways Bitcoin's better, but in some ways gold's better. And that's why I've never gone 100% one way or 100% the other way. Not that I criticize anybody who wants to. I mean, if you're young and you can take the risk and handle the volatility, Bitcoin's probably the better way to go. But my investors can't handle that volatility, and so I've balanced the two. And I think that's the intelligent approach. And one of the things I always had in the back of my mind was this East-West dynamic. I mean, the West is all based on fiat. The East is very much based on commodities, particularly Russia. And China and Russia have made an enormous, as you pointed out in the earlier part of the conversation, China and Russia have made an enormous bet on gold, enormous, and they're going to have a seat at the table. I mean, Russia has the largest pile of natural resources. China has the most, productive manufacturing capacity, and the rest of the world has a lot of good stuff too. But all three of those groups are going to have a seat at the monetary table, in my opinion, when we reset.
Yeah, and as an American sitting here right now, I feel very vulnerable, right? And because of the factors that you just mentioned, like Russia and China are producing commodities that the world needs. The United States has hollowed out its manufacturing base and financialized its economy. It's essentially a service economy built around the fiat monetary system and trying to game that any way possible. And now, as it becomes pretty clear that may be coming to an end, we need to begin reshuffling at home to protect ourselves and become more secure.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, look, this is a great country and a lot of great people here. And, you really you listen to the Russians carefully, you listen to the Chinese carefully. I mean, a lot of things are wrong with those countries, but a lot of times they want to be like us. The thing that's messed up America, in my opinion, is we've been just so hubristic. We've been so arrogant. I mean, if these countries in the world, I mean, China has said repeatedly they don't want a war, but they've also said repeatedly that we take advantage of our strong dollar system. Putin has said the same thing. He said he wanted to be a part of NATO way back when. I mean, these countries want to be like us. The problem we've got is we've got elites in our country that are sickos. I mean, we've got these neocons and we've got this military-industrial complex who just live off of war, and they want to create conflicts. I mean, I don't think the average Russian wants to kill me. I don't want to kill the average Russian. I don't think the average Chinese guy wants to kill me. I don't want to kill the average Chinese guy. But I'll tell you what, there are people at the top of our government who basically, live to have people fighting with one another because it puts them in power. And, as you would say, Bitcoin fixes this, right?
Yeah,
We got to fix it.
we really do. And it's like, so how does Bitcoin play into this situation in the short to medium term, right? Because I'm sure there's obviously been a lot of talk about Russia turning to UnionPay, which is one of China's payment rails, and it seems like they may be dead set on creating their own gold-backed CBDCs or something like that as well. Do you see China and Russia adopting Bitcoin at all, or doing
Yeah,
more in-depth research?
I think China's less like, we all know they shoved out the miners, which
Mhm.
I think something distributed and private like Bitcoin is kind of anathema to a communist system. But both of these countries have somewhat adopted capitalism, and we're all kind of merging towards some common system. Russia kind of shut it down, but then the word I got was that Gazprom went to Putin and said, "No, no, no, we're mining this stuff and making money off of mining it. Don't be so harsh." And I think as they both come to study it strategically, they'll realize that to the degree they don't embrace it, they've made an enormous error. As Jason Lowery has pointed out. So, um, I'm not sure how it all shakes out. I mean, yeah, look, everybody at the top would love to shove us all into CBDCs and control our spending and, live in a Klaus Schwab world, where we own nothing and we're happy. But, the problem they've got is there aren't very many of them and there are a lot of us. And, we're not going to put up with it. And I'm very optimistic that the continual the weakness of these currencies is going to lead to alternatives, and those alternatives are going to also solve our political problem.
I agree, because I think this is something that many people severely underlook right now, which is the collapsing confidence in these institutions. Like, to
Yeah,
think, like, those out there are like, no, we're going to switch to a CBDC. The Fed's going to create this thing. It's like people are losing confidence in mass in these political institutions and banking institutions. To think that they're going to watch the systems that they built over the last decades collapse and then trust them to build a new one just seems a bit far
yeah,
fetched to me.
completely. I mean, I think the biggest trend of the time is that even people who are not necessarily as plugged in or as bright about what's going on are becoming incredibly disillusioned because of all the lies they've been told continually. And it's gotten worse and worse. And as people study the system, they come to realize that the system rewards people who lie, and that's how they get to the top. And but that will change. It has to change because the system is going to reset itself. And that, we know, is really kind of a mathematical certainty. So,
Yeah. So, what would you say to the average Joe out there listening right now, or not the average Joe listening, but like, how do you see this transition and this moment
well,
affecting the common man? You were tweeting about a
yeah,
hyperinflationary
I mean,
induced depression.
yeah, I mean, sadly, I think the transition period here is going to be hard, very hard on a lot of people. And I think it's horrible, but I didn't build this system. I just live within it, and all we can each do as individuals is fight to try and make it a better system and protect ourselves. I mean, I think that people who are honest and work hard and will have productive capacity on the other side are going to be just fine. I think, I think I've said in the past, I would, avoid leverage, and I would keep my savings in sound money. And I think the two forms of sound money that most people should own are Bitcoin and gold. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot. Yeah, sadly, I mean, you see all these commodity prices shooting up, and that's a symptom of shortages and the currency failing. The flip of that, though, is that $200 oil or $150 oil and $8 gasoline. I mean, this is going to lead to a recession, right? And then you're going to start having people laid off, and then demand is going to fall. I mean, one of the great problems with this interconnected economic system that we've got is every input, it's like the butterfly's wings that they flap, and it gets felt around the world. And so, as I've said in the past in other podcasts, I mean, I think the Fed is kind of driving a clown car between, one guardrail, which is extreme inflation, and another guardrail, which is deflation, because and so they, until this whole thing happened, Powell was talking about raising rates, and everyone was saying they're going to raise them 9 times and take them, and they're going to clamp, right? And maybe they would have. I mean, they had to. I mean, their credibility was fading fast, so I suspect they would have started to try, and maybe they still will. But the point is that, okay, so let's say they do that. Let's say they close off demand. Let's say in doing that, the bond market tanks, the stock market tanks. And by the way, the stock market is, the wealth effect of the stock market is a huge component of everybody's spending. I mean, you wipe out the stock market and everyone's going to feel a lot poorer. And, then we're going to suddenly be heading towards the Great Depression, because, a system that's as indebted as our system is, I mean, that's the problem, right? I mean, we should have let the system reset in 2003. We should have let it reset in 2008. We're well beyond the point. We've been shoving coins in the in the fuse box for a long time, and so if we ever let it naturally reset, it would look like the 1930s. And so we can't really do that, or they can't really do that, in my opinion, because they can't take the political pain. So in the inflation deflation balance and debate, I think eventually they'll break through the inflation guardrail. Because I think, if things do start to slow down and it does start to get rough, which I think is going to happen, one thing they will not let happen is they will not let the markets fail. And, I mean, what did it take? It took, 3 trillion post 2008, but that was spread out over 3 years. I mean, we printed 3 trillion in 8-9 months at COVID. And this one, I mean, let's say this one really gets to be big. I could easily see this being 9, 10, 15, 20 trillion. I mean, it's just each one gets bigger, right? And at what point does everyone say, hey, you know what? These guys can't stop. The system is designed to blow apart. And when that happens, that's really Gresham's law. I mean, if you study the history of hyperinflations, it happens when a majority of the people come to the conclusion that, oh my God, there is absolutely no way they can stop this printing, or else it will collapse. Therefore, what I am holding is going down in value. I need to hold something else. And so, everyone says, well, there's no monetary velocity, therefore you can't get inflation. Well, you watch monetary velocity. When everyone thinks the dollar is going to fail, which it is, there's going to be a lot of monetary velocity as everybody buys gold and buys Bitcoin. I mean, a lot. Or houses. I mean, we've already seen some Gresham's law on housing, in my view. I mean, part of the reason why houses are up 20% year on year versus the 2008 example is that, I mean, even in the 2008 housing boom, there was never a year where they're up more than 14%. I mean, to me, everyone there, they're just putting on the Hugo Stinnes trade, which was, lever yourself up and buy something real, right? I mean, the government will give you 30-year money at 3% to buy something you can live in. Well, guess what? People aren't fools. They're like, oh yeah, if I can afford it, I'm going to do that, because that thing I'm buying is going up 20% a year, and it only costs me 3% to buy it, and I can use a lot of leverage. That makes total sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, just sitting here in Austin, Texas, it's insane.
Right. Yeah.
Seeing how, I mean, Austin has a interesting dynamic where many people are leaving in the Northeast and California to come to the new tech hub, but it's being compounded by everything as well. It is.
And I'm not suggesting that's necessarily always a good trade, because if you get too far out over your skis, you buy more house than you need. You lose your job, and now you can't make the payments. I mean, to the degree we veer towards the deflationary guardrail, housing is going to fall a lot. I mean, in the Depression, my grandfather, there was a house that was in Birmingham, Michigan, that sold for, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 in the late 20s, and he bought it for $7,000. in 1932. So, that's quite a drop, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's it's very interesting times, and it will be like, what does the Fed do, and when does that collapse in confidence happen? I think it's happening in real
It's
time, right?
happening.
Like, because like
This is game on. I mean, it's happening, right?
I mean, you had Jerome Powell come out and say what you're not allowed to say as the Fed governor last week, which is there could be
Yeah,
more than one reserve currency. I mean, I think that's him signaling to the market the best that he can, like, hey,
yeah,
the gig may
yeah.
be up here.
Well, and I think I saw Nick Samaros, the guy from the Wall Street Journal, who's the Fed guy, asked him, said, are you going to be judged if you're able to stop inflation? Are you going to be able to stop inflation? And he said, kind of, yeah, I hope so. I mean, but there was a condition. I mean, he used the word hope, right? I mean, look, I think there's trembling going on all over the place in the halls of power. I mean, absolute trembling. I mean, they're not stupid. They know how much trouble they're in.
Yeah.
And what I'm watching for is to see, how they react and what the next moves are and what the new narrative is. I mean, they're undoubtedly trying to craft that right now.
Well,
Um, you know,
I
yeah.
mean, the situation with Russia and Ukraine is definitely exacerbating the situation, or the inflation situation, but they're trying to throw it all on that. Like, oh no,
Oh, absolutely.
It's the
Yeah.
Ukraine
No, it's
situation.
it's
That's
yeah. I mean, there's some who can say that we arguably pushed them right to that point. And I mean, this very conveniently, it's like the Ukraine dog ate my homework here on inflation. You
right.
know, right? But I mean, inflation was roaring before the Ukraine. This is making it worse. I mean, I think it's interesting that Putin chose this as the time to do it. I mean, I think he realized we were vulnerable,
Well, yeah, you're coming out of a
and
global supply chain crunch, and then you can compound that on the energy and commodity side. And then specifically, it just throws fuel on that fire to the point
yeah,
where you have Joe Biden going to Nicolas Maduro, asking him like to sell us Venezuelan oil to
right.
and
Yeah, I mean, if Putin wanted to be seen as more of a statesman and less of a thug, what he should do is he should pivot. He should declare peace, accept whatever they're going to give him out of the Ukraine, try and get a guarantee that he doesn't get missiles on his doorstep, and then say, look, guys, really behind all of this, what was really bugging me was that you guys have had the U.S. reserve currency and you've abused the world for 30 years, and we're tired of it. We're going to a gold standard, period. And if you do that, I'll sit here peacefully and we'll play our role. I mean, if he did that, he'd be a historical figure of some significance in a more positive light than he's being seen today.
I agree. And that if he does put the ball in the West court like that, and that puts the West in a very precarious situation, because then they'll look like a boogeyman in history, because the alternative to meeting at the table and doing that is World War III in a
Well, that's right, and that's what's horrifying. I mean, that's what's absolutely horrifying. That I mean, if you've read a lot of history and you've read how World War One got going, and everyone thought it would be short and quick and nothing serious, and then you look at what happened, and you kind of see some of the similar historical accidents being made here. I mean, everyone's, oh, it's just a little thing in the Ukraine. It's not that big a deal. Nobody could know. It would never go nuclear. It would never get serious. We would never enter. Blah blah blah. I hope all those things are true, because I've got kids. And I mean, World War II, we slaughtered 50 million people. Historically, most fourth turnings have had wars involved. Having said that, we've now got the form of ultimate war, which I've always hoped would be the kind of thing that would prevent us from blowing ourselves up. In other words, the knowledge that we could actually kind of is the safety valve. There's no such thing as a limited nuclear war, right?
yeah. Let's hope it's limited to an information war. Obviously, we have a hot war in Ukraine right now, but I think
Yeah.
we're in a battle for the minds of the masses. It's crazy, seeing the way normal people are being sort of ginned up to support like war efforts. Like, we're seeing, my wife was on Instagram yesterday, and she's like, "There's a bunch of people stories are they're posting like, "Hey, inflation is the price of punishing Russia. Like it's temporary. Like higher prices at the pump and at the grocery store are worth it for peace in the long term." And these are obviously privileged upper middle class to upper class individuals who don't understand that inflation's really going to affect the poor people uh, like very hard, and then on
Oh
top of that,
yeah.
it's not a solution to you're they don't even recognize that we're not going to like economically choke Russia out in the way they think we are because they have all the commodities.
Well, and the other thing I think the West doesn't realize is, the Russian people have endured one hell of a lot over their history, and I would bet on their ability to take pain. I would suspect is a lot higher than the woke West's ability to take pain. You know,
you, you get a you
they've
get
had they've had several hyperinflations in the last 20 years. I mean, they've seen their currency be wiped out several times. They lost multiples of what we lost in World War II. It's these are not lightweight people. And Yeah, no, it's a very sad situation. I think the hope, the only hope in my view, is that we can get enough people in the West educated to the fact that this is stupid, and we can help those who are suffering through this thing in inflation, and we can change the political structure to get back to sound money. I mean, because at the bottom of it all, I mean, my Twitter handle is, and I borrowed it from somebody, I can't recall who now, but fix the money, fix the world. I mean, that is the issue, right? At the bottom of all of these problems, having unsound money is what's created this mess. And it's by the way, it's where the war is being fought. I mean, I really think what Putin did was he shot the petrodollar in the head, very much in the way that Charles de Gaulle did it in 1967 when he started asking for all his gold back, and
mhm.
that forced Nixon to go off the gold standard. I think that's what this is about.
What do you think is necessary? Like again, we're talking about like the hubris and the sociopathic tendencies of our leaders here in the West. Like, how do we shake them and say we're not going into World War III? You need to uh, enact some extreme ownership, recognize the precarious situation you put yourself in due to hubris and bullying on the world stage. Like it's time to eat some humble pie. And then, like people will say, "Oh, you're un-American. Like you're not a patriot, whatever." It's
Oh,
like no, you need to be. Everybody needs to be realistic about the situation.
absolutely.
Here's the landscape, and we have two paths we can go down. We can recognize that we messed up and we're very hubristic and have put not only the U.S. but the world in a precarious situation via our bullying tactics, and say, all right, we're done being bullies, or we can double, triple, quadruple down and plunge into World War III.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the challenge for you, me, and all the people who feel the way we do, and that is to try and do the best job we possibly can of educating the largest number of people that we possibly can. I mean, I'm encouraged because, I'm encouraged about this country. I don't think this country is stupid, and I don't think this country is a warmongering country as a general rule. I think there are parts of it which, allow themselves to get sucked up into that thought pattern, but I don't think they're the majority, based on what I've seen in the voting history of the country. So, um, you know, as long as we don't allow ourselves to get fooled, and as long as there's a good alternative press and media and internet and so forth. Oh, sorry about that.
It's good.
Dog,
Matt's dogs bark all the time in the back of our
dog's
HOA. So
hungry. Yeah, then I think our odds are pretty good at getting out of this without it being World War III. I really do. I think look. Perhaps I'm overly optimistic, but I think what's going to happen is we're going to have runaway inflation. It's going to be really bad, and some people at the top are going to get smart enough to understand that we need to do a sound money currency reset. And I'm hoping that guys like Jason Lowry and people in the Pentagon, people in the Army, think tank people, et cetera. I mean, there's been a lot written about this. I mean, it's not as if this hasn't been studied. I mean, Triffin's dilemma and the whole reserve currency issue has been well known by many people for a long time. And so what's really going on is you've got these old powerful elites who benefit from it, who are trying to hang on to it unnecessarily. And I mean, I've been reading that we're going to have $7 or $8 gasoline at Labor Day. Well, you know what that means? I mean, that's going to be an unmitigated disaster, right?
I mean,
for this country.
yeah,
Right? And
Parker Lewis texted me last night. I think he filled up his gas tank. He was like $4 gas in Texas. Very spooky.
That's cheap. I mean, I just talked to somebody in Connecticut who paid $5.50 for premium.
Yeah, but we're talking about Texas. Texas is usually significantly cheaper than the rest of the country.
Right.
And like $4 gas here is like, it's crazy.
Yeah, fair point. So look, the price signals are going to tell people there's a serious problem here, and that's going to come around politically. I mean, it's got to.
Well, speaking of timing, maybe this timing actually works out for us, and due to the fact that we've got midterms this year, so maybe there's politicians who really want to get a seat at the table, and this is what they can campaign on, like, hey, recognizing that we messed up, and if I get in there.
I haven't seen much of that. I mean, the last politician I ever really liked was Ron Paul, but I haven't seen a lot of that. But we have seen some support for Bitcoin, and that's encouraging, right?
Yeah.
And that's a sound money asset. So, look, it will become clear, is my sense. At least, I don't know. Perhaps I'm wildly overly optimistic, and that we're going to just devolve into, a complete mess and a shooting war. I mean, I sure hope not. I really hope not.
I do as well, and I think I share your optimism. There's too much at stake. There's so much potential.
Right.
As a society, look at us. We're video streaming from across the country right now. We're sending this out to millions of people around the world, and we've gotten this far as a society. It would be an incredible shame if we were to ruin, because World War III in a world with nuclear proliferation
it doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, who wants to start that? Nobody. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Which isn't to say it couldn't happen, but I think it's a low probability event to happen. I think more likely we're going to have a lot of these proxy wars like we're having now. There's going to be a lot of kind of skirmishing around at the edges. I mean, China will probably start being a little more aggressive with respect to Taiwan. I mean, and look, all of these great powers have interests that they're trying to protect and defend, and they're trying to take care of their people. And in my view, the solution to this is decentralization, which is what the internet has brought, and which is what Bitcoin brings in the monetary sphere, right? I mean, we need to get more decentralized, because it's these big centralized organizations that decide to take these, if controlled by small groups of elites that see a way to make those organizations benefit themselves, they try to take these policy paths that hurt the rest of us, right? I mean, that's really what's going on.
Yeah, and again, silver lining, America, great country and good foundation, like states asserting their autonomy. I mean, you even had Ron DeSantis, when Biden asked him to send some of the Florida Coast Guard or National Guard up for the State of the Union. He was like, no thanks, they're going to stay here. And so just that one small gesture of, hey, we have some autonomy, you can't boss me around. I want to see more of that. I think we're going to see more of that. I think Bitcoin will be a part of that.
Completely agree. I mean, it's, people say it's un-American, the thought patterns we're having here un-American. I mean, there's nothing really more American if you go back to the founding documents. I mean, the issue is that, we've gotten way, way, way far away from the founding documents, right? I mean, the founding documents said only silver and gold could be money, right? Well, how's that working out, right?
Right. Yeah. No. It's almost like the American populace has been psyoped and thinking that being a good American is being a warmonger and being a bully.
Not almost like it absolutely is the case. I mean, it's it's been a long slippery slope. The Fed got established in 1913. It was a money cartel. I mean, and the good news is, though, that there's, these technical developments have changed the playing field. I mean, the internet really is the Gutenberg press of our day, right? And, if you consider the nation state to be, the Catholic Church of the, 14th century, the internet is the press, and they're alternative sources of information now, and everyone's figuring that out. And the New York Times does not tell everybody what to think anymore. People get to decide for themselves, and they get to gather information any way they want to. And so that's a powerful change. And it's going to be, in the long run, it's going to work out great. But in the short run, we're going to go through a real rocky monetary period, in my opinion, because I don't think the world has not experienced a sovereign debt crisis like this since the 1930s. And so there's nobody alive today who's lived through one, including me. And all I've done is read about it.
Yeah, well, even that, like this crisis is probably going to be an order of magnitude larger in terms of the amount of debt that we've accrued.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there is that. I mean, it's certainly going to be larger than '08. I mean, '08 was a warm up to this. '08 was, at the housing level in one country. This is at the sovereign level, and it's worldwide. And more importantly, it's at the sovereign level with the world's reserve currency, which is the dollar.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Like, so obviously you are very closely aligned, and you understand the gold market probably better than most people on the planet. And there's very strong arguments to be made. I've been convinced that gold markets have been manipulated via paper for some time. What does an uncoupling, or how does gold break through that manipulation during this crisis? If so, what happens exactly?
That's a great question, and something obviously I spent a lot of time thinking about. I mean, so they've created a lot of paper gold. First of all, let's just quantify the numbers on it, because I think it's helpful for people to understand. So in 1980, in 71, we were on a gold standard. You could more or less take the U.S. gold reserves, 8,300 tons. It's roughly 266 million ounces. You could take that, divided into M1, you got to $35, which is what the set price was coming out of Bretton Woods. Obviously, in the 60s, what happened is, guns and butter, we started spending money. Actually, we did a little bit before that with the Korean War, but it was just a blip. And more or less from World War II to the early 60s, we ran kind of balanced budgets. We were fairly monetarily responsible. So, the gold standard worked for us at that time. Then we started spending a lot of money, and other countries noticed that. And so, they got to the point where they said, hey, hang on a second, you're running deficits. You want us to pay for it because, we're having to hold your dollars, and you're diluting your dollars. So you're more or less stealing from us. And the firm that, or the country that figured it out the most and the quickest was France, and that's because they had a brilliant economist there, a guy named Jacques Rueff, and he advised de Gaulle. And so they started asking for their gold back, and the U.S. had huge reserves coming out of World War II, and they started to be depleted very rapidly. In fact, in my next quarterly, I'm going to show the chart of that, how they went from, I think it was roughly 20,000 tons down to 8,300 tons, and that whole process kind of showed that you can't spend too much without having your currency weaken. And so what happened then is in 71, Nixon broke the gold standard, as we know. It was at $35, and the market quickly picked up on the fact that we weren't getting any more fiscally responsible and drove gold from $35 to $800. Well, when it got to $800, it's interesting that at that point in time, if you did the same math, remember in the early 60s, you could look at the money supply outstanding, the ounces of gold, and we more or less were on a gold standard. By the late 70s, at the $35 an ounce, we had gone way off the gold standard because we were spending too much. By the late 70s, if you did the same math, what you find is that we were on about a 55% coverage. This is the number of ounces divided into the M1 money supply. So, and historically in Britain, they were able to determine that if you had 30 to 60% gold coverage, in other words, you had that amount of gold as compared to your M1, that was good enough, that you, because 100% of the M1 wasn't going to come ask for the gold all at one time. So anyway, the point I'm making is that in the 80s, we actually had it reasonably well covered, 55% covered. If gold had gone to $1,500 in 1980, we would have had it 100% covered. Okay, fine. Volcker came in, put rates up, reassured them that they weren't going to print any more money, got money supply growth under control, and we entered a deflationary period. Technology took off. Later on, China came in to provide low price labor, et cetera. And so we had a very long deflationary period. Well, throughout that, we kept eventually, slowly but surely, running more deficits and printing more money. But nobody picked up on it, and the gold market didn't pick up on it. And the reason the gold market didn't pick up on it is that we got pretty good at manipulating the gold market. And that grew out of a paper that was written by Larry Summers and Barsky called Gibson's Paradox, which you can find on the web. And then they influenced Robert Rubin, who was an advisor to Clinton, and he was Treasury Secretary at the time. He also had been a gold trader at Goldman Sachs. He said, look, what you need to do is grow the money supply, but you need to grow it without having inflation show up, because inflation will, it's a free lunch. If we can grow the money supply without having inflation show up, you're going to get great economic growth, and it's not going to cost you anything. It's not going to visibly cost you anything. What it does cost you is there's really underlying inflation in the money supply, but you can hide that. And they figured out how to hide it was they could go into the commodities paper gold markets and sell gold that they didn't have. And that's what they did. And so now you've got this enormous unallocated paper gold market. And we don't know how big it is. Luke Roman's done a lot of work on it. Other guys have done work on it. Roman has done work on it. Others have done it as well. But there's clearly, between 220 and 500, or perhaps as much as 1,000 ounces of paper gold for every ounce of real gold in the world. So you're running a big fractional reserve gold market that if anybody came and said, hey, please give me my gold, if everyone came at the same time, there wouldn't be enough gold. The gold price would explode. So you've effectively created, a fake market. And this is the vulnerability that Putin saw because he went to the GATA conference and learned about it, or he had a representative go to the GATA conference and learn about it. And as a result of that, that's the underlying weakness, the unallocated gold market. And there's no other commodity future which has a similar sort of structure where there's that much unallocated paper as against what's underneath it. Well, just so you know, the math on that market today, if you were to go and you look at the gold that the US holds, or theoretically holds, because I think we've probably let some of it go, but let's assume for the sake of argument that we have 8,300 tons. If you did the math on that today as compared to M1, gold would need to be $78,000 an ounce today to give 100% coverage on the gold standard. And it would need to be $25,000 an ounce today to provide 25% coverage, or 25 to 30% coverage, is kind of the minimum necessary. Now, as you know, 25,000, 78,000 are a lot bigger than 2,000 or 1,800. And that shows you how far off the sound money trail that the gold, and how much the gold price has been suppressed. And Bitcoiners are right. Gold is broken. Gold has not worked. Gold has failed. But Bitcoiners are wrong about one thing. They're wrong when they say gold has an enormous monetary premium in it, because it doesn't. It's been manipulated out of it. I mean, it costs about $1,200 on average to pull an ounce of gold out of the ground. You sell it for $1,800 until just recently, $600 a profit. Well, that $600 has to, one, pay the capital to build the mine and keep the mine going, which is generally quite high. And it also has to find more gold, because once you've mined gold, you've got to replace what you've mined. So it's not as if the gold business is just swimming in profits right now. I mean, it is relative to a lot of other industries, but the point I'm trying to make is that if we were to properly try to set the price of gold relative to the money supply, it would be in a completely different zip code, as Luke likes to say. It's not going to 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000. It's going to a much higher number. And this is why, other people have pointed this out. I'm not the first to do this. James Rickert has the same numbers. Dan Oliver has the same numbers. Luke has the same numbers. Roman Manley has the same numbers. There are many people who observe this. But the gold market is not at all attached to the monetary market today. And people say, well, you can't go to a gold standard, you don't have enough gold. That's bullshit. It's like saying you can't go to a Bitcoin standard, there's not enough Bitcoin. Oh, yeah, you can. You can go to any of those standards. All you got to do is have higher prices in today's terms. That's the issue.
And right. So what forces that issue is a run on the vaults, essentially. So you'll have countries.
Yeah. So there was a gold pool that happened in the 60s, the London gold pool. So when things started to come unglued in the 60s, the U.S. started to spend too much, central banks realized that if they let the gold price get above $35, that was going to mean that there was inflation and the whole system was coming unglued. So they all pulled together and they created the London gold pool. And they did everything that people did today. They sold it at strange times. They dumped large amounts on the market. They spread rumors about how much gold was available, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole goal was to hold gold at a $35 price, right? And they were able to do it throughout most of the 60s. And by 67, though, they just didn't have enough gold. And people the weakness of a suppression scheme like this is that, yes, you can say, you can issue a paper claim, here's your gold, okay? But what you can't do is when somebody says, please give me the ounce, please give me the gold ounce. I want to see it. I want to hold it. I want it in my hand. Well, you can't give them a paper claim for that, right? You either have the gold ounce or you don't. And if there are 100 claims for every ounce that exists and enough people ask for the ounce, this is musical chairs where there's only one chair and there are a lot of people circling it, right? So that's going to be the underbelly that gets, that's going to bust this thing wide open. More and more people, as Gresham's law kicks in, more and more people. I mean, what happens, and this is Rickard's ICE 9 thesis, which I hadn't read until recently, but I came up with the same thesis on my own, which is what happens when gold goes up. We wake up some morning and gold is up $1,000, and then the next day it's up another $1,000, and then after that would gold holders sell into it? Most probably wouldn't. I'm not sure I would, and then it goes no offer. Do you see where I'm going with this? I mean, it's, this is a run on the bank, right? This is the equivalent of, if you're running a fractional reserve bank, this is It's a Wonderful Life, right? I mean, there's a bank run. Oh my God, let's go get our money out of the bank now while we can, right? Let's be, you got to be first or there's not going to be any left for me. Well, that's what we're talking about. That's the thing that we're talking about here. There's only so much gold in the world. Gold has been money for 5,000 years. And every human being on the planet more or less understands that there's value in gold because it's a token for the energy that it took to mine it. In very much in the same way that, and it's an analog token, right? Very much in the same way that Bitcoin is a digital token for the energy it took to mine it. And in many ways that's superior because you can move it more easily, you can store it more securely. You can't rehypothecate it. You can't create paper Bitcoin. Well, that's not entirely true, actually. You can create paper Bitcoin, but there isn't as much paper Bitcoin today as there is paper gold and so forth. So,
yeah, if you have your Bitcoin on an exchange, you have paper Bitcoin.
Well, that's right. That's the other thing. You can own GLD, but they read the prospectus carefully. They can force majeure settle you out at yesterday's closing price. And the fact that gold's now trading at $10,000 an ounce, and yesterday it closed at 2,000. Well, sorry, I should have read the prospectus, right?
Yeah. So, in your mind, who actually has the gold? Like, obviously, there's a lot of speculation about Fort Knox and whether or not that's actually supplied. Does Russia holds their own gold, right? Like they've been smart.
Yeah, I think China has a lot more than they say they have. Russia holds a lot. Indian women hold a lot.
Yeah.
Sadly, Americans don't own nearly as much as we should. And frankly, there's a lot in the ground. It's not as though all the gold in the world has been surfaced yet. We've got mines that are economic to mine at $2,000 gold. At $10,000 gold, you'd be surprised at how deep and how far and wide we can go to find more of it. So there's still a lot of gold in the Earth's crust. The big fat deposits have been found. This is very much like the oil market. There aren't any Saudi oil fields laying around in the gold business anymore. We're down to thinner pickings, but spend enough money and you can get gold. There's gold in the ocean. You can, there are gold's in lots of places, but yeah. So that's kind of the background there.
Yeah. Canada shouldn't have sold all your gold. Yeah.
Well, Britain, they shouldn't have sold all their gold. And this actually brings up an issue that I should touch on because a few people asked me before this about it. And Luke tweeted about it or had a podcast about this recently. I do get concerned that as we move towards gold and Bitcoin being money, these sovereign states are going to try and do everything they can to get their arms around these two assets because they know and understand how important they are. And so, seizing gold mines, requiring people to report Bitcoin addresses, you name it. Look, we're playing for all the marbles here. We're playing for all the monetary marbles. And so, okay, it's not a kinetic war where it's going to be a nuclear war, but, an all monetary marbles war, you're going to see, elites and governments doing stuff that I think is going to shock you. I know I was shocked when I saw Trudeau, say he could seize somebody's bank account. Now they apparently got him to back off that a bit, but really, is that where things are going? And then I was further shocked when I saw the United States saying, yeah, all these Russian reserves, they're ours. I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really an act of war. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it, right?
Yeah, and well, this is harpens back to something we were talking about earlier. Like, this is why these media and information sources are so important to get out to the public. Like, hey, the government's done this. Number one, Executive Order 6102 in the 30s. They've already confiscated people's gold, which you could argue led to us being able to completely detach ourselves from any type of gold standard at Bretton Woods. Like, they're going to do it. They're going to at least try to do it again with gold and Bitcoin. Just like, how do we articulate to the public, like, don't let this happen? And Bitcoin, that's why I like Bitcoin so much. It's significantly harder to do this because you can just hold it 12 words in your head. And it's how is it even possible to get public perception to a point where you have a mass movement to just basically put your hands out and say, no, we're not allowing you to do this, when they eventually and inevitably do try to do it?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, again, millennials will grow up. Millennials get it. We've already got a couple of Congress people. We got at least one senator, maybe two, arguably, and several Congress people who get it. 10% plus of the population owns it. In 3 or 4 years, that's going to be 30 or 40%. The word is spreading fast, and people, a lot of people, they shit on the American public, they shit on the average American person, but I think people are just a lot smarter than people give them credit for when it comes to matters of, their own security, their own money, a lot of other things. I mean, the bailouts, let's just take an example as the bailouts, right? The 2008 financial bailouts, right? I mean, that was an evil act. That was a criminal act. That was wrong. That was unfair. And you know what? 98% of Americans knew it. I mean, they totally got it, or certainly 90% of them got it. I mean, I don't know many people who said, oh yeah, no, that was right to bail all those people, those guys out. And so, I think if the U.S. government starts coming around and saying, hey, your Bitcoin is our Bitcoin. We have a right to know this. We have a right to know that. You got to turn, if governments go draconian, I think there's going to be big pushback. I think there's going to be a really big pushback, especially in America.
Yeah.
I can't see Americans putting up with it. I just can't see it.
No, I can't see millennials or Zoomers looking at. And again, I don't want to be mean or anything. Just look at the state of our leaders, whether it be Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, or all people that we wouldn't let drive cars because they're so old and they can't. Like, it's like, all right, you're
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I mean, I think there's no doubt that anyone with their eyes open can see the corruption and just how deep and embedded it is on all the way through. I mean, it's not specific to one party. It's specific to the system, which is sadly very, very broken. But once again, Bitcoin fixes this. I mean, it will. And I'm look, I think what we're looking at is going to be extremely messy. Don't get me wrong, but I'm extremely optimistic, and I'm actually quite excited that things are taking the pace they're taking because, if you look at all this stuff, I mean, it's like, I got a fixed time window here. I mean, I can't wait 30 years for this to happen. I mean, you can, but I can't.
I can, but I don't want to.
No, exactly. And I think if the system, I mean, it's like tearing a Band-Aid off, right? I mean, if the system's broken, which it is, and we want to have a better system, which, needs to be fixed, which we do. All right, fine. Let's get on with it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off, fix this, have it be bad for a while if need be, and get on it and build a better system, right? I mean, it's, that's the Jeff Booth argument. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Bitcoin too. The system is already being built parallel.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, actually, one way I orange pill people these days is I take them through the Strike app, and I just try and show them, and I'm like, look at this. Wouldn't you like to be able to pay this way and not have to pay MasterCard and Visa, 300 basis points? I mean, this is just it's it's going to change the world, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's going to be doing it. It's going to seem obvious looking backwards, but looking forward right now, most people aren't even. And when I start talking about strike, I mean, everybody's eyes glaze over. Nobody I know knows what strike is.
No.
Nobody.
It's
I mean, unless
changing
you're
the
a
game.
Bitcoiner, you wouldn't know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
well, no, they shouldn't change their name. I mean, it's going to become a household word
No,
in
I said
5 years.
they're changing the game.
Oh, they're changing the game. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, speaking of orange pilling, the last time we spoke, it was right before you were about to go to a gold conference in Louisiana to give a rally cry for Bitcoin to an audience of gold enthusiasts. How was that, and how have your conversations with other gold investors been in regards to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And that speech is out there, and I'm proud of it. It took a lot of time working on it and writing it. I've said this before in podcasts, but I think everyone should know it. I thought it was pretty interesting. So first of all, you go to a gold conference, and there are a lot of, I mean, the age tends to be kind of on the older side. There aren't a lot of millennials there, and probably not even Zoomers and so forth, and Gen Z, or Gen X. I mean, and so you know we've got a big audience, call it 1,000 people, and one of the speakers had the intelligent idea to kind of ask, hey, everybody here, we know you all own gold, that's obvious. Everybody here who owns Bitcoin, raise your hand. I think half the hands went up, and so I was impressed and happy about that. I mean, I think the two investment theses align perfectly in terms of sound money, Austrian economics, what's been going wrong. So and I had a few people come and argue with me, and they couldn't get past the physicality argument and all the standard Peter Schiff kind of stuff. But I would say in general, I think I probably orange pilled a few people in the sense that they thought, what? I mean, I'm not selling all my gold, but maybe it does make sense to have a little bit of a allocation into this area. And so, I think a gold bug is your easiest orange pill target because they get the monetary piece. I mean, some people don't even get that, right?
Yeah, that's what. I mean, we did this the first time we spoke. We like gold investors and Bitcoiners are on the same team. We're all on the sound money team.
Absolutely.
Just stop
Absolutely.
infighting with each other.
I think that's actually slowed down and calmed down.
I do as
I
well.
mean, yeah. I mean, I know that I try not to dump on Bitcoiners because Bitcoin's been, flat. I mean, and I try to even defend Bitcoiners because, Bitcoin's been soft recently. I know some people are kind of like, geez, this is no fun. And gold's been doing okay. And I mean, neither one should be doing victory dances when the other one doesn't work. And I've long maintained Bitcoin's going to crush gold's performance in the longer run, but gold is going to be more stable throughout the entire run. So if you can't handle the volatility, then maybe gold is the right choice for you.
Yeah, I can hear Bitcoiners screeching in the background. Guys, stop screeching. Okay, it's okay to say these things. It definitely is true too. There is going to be less
Well,
volatility.
I mean, look, we've really got to come. I mean, everyone says, well, there must be one. I've heard all that, blah blah blah. I know Saylor's argument. I get it, but we've really got a common enemy, which is a statist run currency that is just they're living off of their privilege, right? I mean, they're printing money and doing what they want to do, and every day we pay for it at the gas pump or at the food store. And no, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of having my savings be debased and ripped off by people who want to benefit from doing that.
It's an inherently evil system. It's weird that
It absolutely is. Yeah,
all of
it's criminal.
society.
I mean, it's criminal. I mean, you and I can't print money, but people who can are revered as Federal Reserve governors, and listened to, and people put credibility in what they say. Some people, not all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how do we prevent ourselves from doing this again? If the reset does happen, we do transition to a sound money. That's a thought that always lingers in my head. Is it inevitable to stray away?
That's our grandkids' problems. I mean, I mean, humans are humans. We'll figure out some other way to mess it up, no doubt. But I mean, I think that I think the issue of inflation will and monetary abuse that'll be taken out of the hands of large governments and solved. I think when we're on one of these standards or some combination. I mean, to me, the money really is a representation of energy. So you could do a gold standard, you could do a Bitcoin standard, you could do an oil standard, you could do a hybrid of the above. You could do a commodity standard like the Bancor, which was proposed by Keynes at Bretton Woods. I mean, just we need a standard that reflects sound money principles such that it doesn't give somebody seigniorage, privilege, and power over the money supply. I mean, it was Rothschild who said back in the 1800s, let me control the money supply. I don't care who makes the laws. And that really is true. I mean, if you control the money supply, you can get rich at the expense of everybody else. I mean, you know, that is the cotillion effect. And, those who are in power have used it to their advantage massively at the expense of the common man. It's tragic, absolutely tragic.
Yeah. I'm very bullish on. Well, it's a shame what's going on from an energy policy perspective here in the United States. I hope it is funny seeing everybody come out of the woodwork, whether it be Mark Andreessen, Elon Musk, like we need to drill, we need nuclear. After
Suddenly, Greta's not looking like such a genius anymore, right?
no, nor are any of the uh, thought leaders in the energy policy space over the last 2 decades in the West. It's and again, Bitcoin is driving a lot of this too. I mean, we're seeing it in the oil and gas industry. At Cathedra, like people are waking up in the energy sector to begin integrating Bitcoin mining operations into their operational stack. It's happening, and that's like you said, a currency backed by energy to a certain degree. This is what I tell the energy companies that are thinking about becoming miners. Like, you are going to be replacing the Federal Reserve. You're not going to be controlling the amount of Bitcoin that exists or an interest rate associated with it, but you're replacing like the Fed window essentially at the mining pool level, where
That's right. That's exactly right.
No longer is the creation and distribution of money confined to a small window that only primary dealers have access to. Anybody in the world can have access to it if they're
That's exactly right.
so willing to buy an ace. And that concept in and of itself is massively revolutionary for humanity. Just
Absolutely.
the window is constricted to this, and we're going to open it up to where you don't even know the edges of it.
The democratic nature of it all is just stunning. I mean, it's really a thing of beauty. I mean, that's obviously, you got to go further, quite a ways down the rabbit hole to fully understand those implications. But once you start to, and you just think, wow, this is really great.
We may be able to get peace on Earth.
Certainly in that direction. I mean, there'll always be humans that want to fight with other humans, I suspect.
Yeah, I do as well.
But maybe not at industrial scale in nation state form, and that would be a big positive.
It would be. It would be. We just gotta hopefully we can get through these next weeks, these next months without getting into World War III.
Yeah, I like I say, I'm pretty optimistic that won't happen. I think it's a prisoner's dilemma, right? It's mutually assured destruction is actually really a pretty big anti-war thing. I mean, there's no sense. There's no sense in going there.
No.
So, having said that, the monetary war is going to rage.
Oh yeah.
It's going to rage, and it's for all the marbles. And there's going to be a lot of volatility, and it's going to be very tough. And as I said, I think I said earlier in this podcast, probably my number one thing is focus on not being, if you're monetary wise, focus on saving in sound money terms and not being leveraged. And then beyond that, I tweeted it the other day. I just said I'd focus on physical fitness and community, because if we're going through tough times, which I think we might be going through, being physically fit and healthy is always better than not. And then, community is what, has your back, so that if to the degree things start going in the wrong direction, none of us work too well alone. We all work well in groups. So,
yeah, all you millennials out there, you're going to have to pull your head up from your phone, myself included, and go shake your neighbor's hand.
Yeah. My phones are great, though.
They are.
Yeah.
They're double-edged swords in some regards as well. people can get lost in them and not. It's get very antisocial. That's why.
Yeah.
That's what we've been pushing here. Go shake your rancher's hand. Make sure you know your neighbors. Decentralize. Support your local economy.
Yeah.
Larry, this has been a pleasure as always. Thank you for
Likewise, Marty. Thanks.
thank you for taking some time out of your Monday to speak with me. It's crazy times in the world. It's stuff that you've been predicting for many years. It seems like it's coming to fruition right in front of our eyes.
In some ways, I wish it wasn't, but I've often said I'm cursed with the skill of analysis. I like to figure stuff out. Not always good, but systems work in a certain way, and if you can understand a system, you can kind of see where it's going.
Yeah, you either recognize and accept it, or put your head in the sand and hope that it isn't true. And that's never a good strategy in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bitcoiners have already recognized and accepted it, so it's a unique thing. I think probably the best thing everyone can do is just try and spread the word. I mean, it's we need to get further up that adoption curve.
Agreed.
More orange-pilled people, more knowledgeable people. I mean, Bitcoiners should be friendly, positive, outgoing. I mean, I will say that. I mean, I went to that gold show, and boy, the gold guys are just tired and beaten down. We've been fighting this battle for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and we are. I had it up earlier on Twitter. We are Lucy in the football, right? I mean, Charlie Brown, Lucy in the football. I mean, we've had that football yank so many times it's ridiculous, and and that's where the Bitcoiners are so much more fun to be with, because it's just you guys are winning, and now maybe you're getting a football moment in this correction, but the point is that in general, Bitcoiners are much more optimistic and positive than gold people. So, we're all sound money advocates. I'm so glad you guys came along and are on the team and are, another weapon in the effort to destroy this money cartel that these evil guys have set up. That we have to live under.
Yeah, if anything, we're just good at memeing. They just get it, ridiculing the.
Maybe it's no. I think it's better than that. You're wicked smart. I mean, it's I look at guys like Jack and you and Parker and Matt and Matt Odell, all the other guys. I'm just like I'm blown away with how what a good group of young people we've got in this community. So it's awesome stuff.
It really is. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you and the others you mentioned, and it is. Yeah, I think it is. I feel very fortunate.
I'm just the old guy that provides context. I've been at this for a while.
I wouldn't relegate yourself to the old guy who just provides context. I think you do more than that. It's again, crazy times, scary times, exciting times. Hopefully we get out on the other.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, what just happened was an earthquake. I mean, that's the summary of our discussion here. What just happened was an earthquake. Putin just shot the dollar in the head, and it accelerated our cause. It actually accelerated our cause. It's good. Things are really moving now, and I was once worried that this was going to take into the 2030s to unfold. No, I don't think so. Oh. This is going to unfold faster.
Yeah, we may look
much
back.
faster.
We may look back at 2025 and be like, oh,
well, I was going to say,
quick.
I mean, the ball is really rolling now. So, it's going to get very interesting. It is interesting, but it's going to get more interesting and sooner, I think. I look at the gap from 2008 to 2020. It was quite a gap. 2020 to now, not such a gap. We got a crisis going on now. I mean, they're coming fast and furious, right? So.
Yeah. Like you said, confidence is key, and confidence is waning pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining.
Yeah, thank you. I know I didn't let you wrap up last time.
No, it's fine.
This time I'll let you wrap up.
I can keep going for hours. I want to respect your time.
Yeah, no, I could too. But I think we've covered everything we need to cover, and I'm happy to come back any other time if you want to talk some more.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking some more on this show in the future. We'll be talking about Bitcoin and gold succeeding in this.
Are you going to Miami?
I am.
Oh, great! I'll see you there.
All right. See you in Miami.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you. Thank you.
All right. Peace and love, freaks.